In a comfortable house on a quiet street, Kemi and Tunde lived with their parents, who were always busy. Their father, Mr. Ogunleye, was a successful contractor. He spent long hours managing different construction sites, ensuring that everything was built just right. Their mother, Mrs. Ogunleye, owned a thriving boutique. She loved fashion and worked hard to keep her shop filled with latest styles, but her busy schedule meant she was often away from home. Kemi, a bright 15-year-old, was in her second year of high school. She was an excellent student who loved reading and painting. Tunde, a 17-year-old brother, was in his final year of school and was well liked by his friends. He was talented in sports and often played soccer with his teammates after school. They both excelled academically and were admired by their teachers. But beneath their bright achievements lay a deep loneliness. Every morning, the Ogunleye family would gather for breakfast, but it was a rushed affair. Mr. Ogunleye would sit at the dining table with a newspaper in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. He would talk about work, hardly noticing that Kemi was struggling to get his attention. "Dad, can I show you my painting later?" she would ask, but he would nod absent-mindedly, too focused on the latest construction news. Mrs. Ogunleye would scurry into the room, dressed in her fashionable attire, checking her watch. "I have a meeting with a new supplier, and I need to get going," she would say hurriedly. "Tunde, don't forget your soccer practice later. Kemi, I am sure you have homework to do." Just like that, breakfast would end, and the children would be left to manage their day without their parents' presence. As they finished their meals, Kemi felt a familiar ache in her heart. She and Tunde were very close. They had always shared secrets and dreams. However, lately, something had begun to change between them. Kemi couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she sensed that their relationship was evolving into something deeper and more complicated. Tunde would catch her gaze and smile in a way that made her heart race. She would blush and look away, feeling a strange mix of excitement and confusion. In the afternoons, when school was over, Kemi and Tunde would find themselves at home alone. Their parents were often too busy to notice how much time they spent together. At first, it felt wonderful. They would play video games, share snacks, and talk for hours about their dreams and fears. They were each other's best friends, and Kemi cherished those moments when they could escape the pressure of school and their parents' expectations. But as weeks turned into months, Kemi noticed her feelings for Tunde shifting. It began subtly, with an innocent brush of shoulders or a lingering hug. Kemi felt butterflies in her stomach whenever he smiled at her. One evening, they were watching a movie in the living room when Tunde playfully nudged her, causing her to laugh. Their eyes locked for a brief moment, and Kemi felt something unfamiliar swell within her. A longing she couldn't understand. It frightened her, but it also thrilled her. "Mom, can I talk to you?" Kemi called out one evening as their mother rushed past her in the hallway. She needed to talk about her feelings to make sense of what was happening. But her mother, distracted by phone calls and business meetings, barely heard her. "Not now, Kemi. I have a very important meeting," Mrs. Ogunleye replied, her voice filled with urgency. Kemi felt a knot hiding in her stomach. She wanted to scream that this was important too, but she knew better than to interrupt her mother. Instead, she retreated to her room, feeling more isolated than ever. Days passed and Kemi continued to wrestle with her emotions. She tried to find ways to push them away, convincing herself that it was just a phase. But every time she and Tunde shared a laugh or a moment of closeness, those feelings only grew stronger. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Kemi decided to take a leap of faith. Tunde, can I ask you something? She said persistently. Sure, what's up? Tunde replied, turning to face her with curiosity in his eyes. Do you ever feel different about me? Like more than just siblings? Kemi's heart raced as she waited for his response. Tunde looked surprised, his eyes widening slightly. I don't know, Kemi. Sometimes I feel really close to you, but I am not sure what that means. He ran a hand through his hair, a hint of uncertainty in his expression. Kemi felt a wave of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone in her feelings. Tunde felt something too. But the conversation didn't go as she had hoped. They both fell silent, unsure of how to navigate the uncharted territory of their relationship. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Kemi couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the edge of something profound and dangerous. She wanted to talk more, to express their feelings, but she didn't know how. Instead, they quietly watched the sky change colors, the air thick with unspoken words. In the coming days, Kemi felt a mix of excitement and dread. She couldn't tell their parents about her feelings. They wouldn't understand, but she also knew she couldn't ignore them. As the weeks passed, their bond deepened, and they began to tread carefully into a space that felt both thrilling and terrifying. As this turned into weeks, Kemi's confusion about her feelings grew. Tunde too seemed to struggle with the changes in their relationship. Their playful moments now carried an awkward weight, one they didn't fully understand. Yet they continued spending time together, drawn to each other in ways they couldn't explain. The more Kemi thought about it, the more she realized that her feelings were not normal. She had always heard that siblings should love each other, but this felt different, deeper. She wanted to talk to her mother again, but each attempt was met with the same response, indifference. Mommy, can we talk? Kemi tried again one evening after dinner. Her mother was already halfway out the door, keys in her hand, ready for another late night meeting with the supplier. Later, Kemi, I am running late. Why don't you talk to your brother? You two are so close, Mrs. Ogunleye said with a dismissive wave, not even turning to face her daughter. Kemi watched her mother leave the house, the familiar ache settling in her chest. She felt like a ghost in her own home, unseen and unheard. Tunde was the only one who seemed to notice her, the only one who seemed to care. But even he was becoming more distant lately, as if the weight of their growing feelings was too much for him to handle. That night, Kemi lay in bed, her mind racing. How could her parents not see what was happening? How could they be so blind to the changes in their children's lives? She remembered hearing her father once tell her mother that they needed to spend more time with the kids, that they were growing up too fast. But her mother had brushed him off, just as she always did. They are not babies anymore. Tunde and Kemi can take care of themselves, she had said. But Kemi didn't feel like she could take care of herself, not with the confusing emotions swirling inside her. Emotions that she knew she shouldn't have. She tossed and turned, wondering if her mother was right, if maybe she was just overthinking everything. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the case. The next morning, Kemi tried one more time. Mommy, I really need to ask you something important, she said, following her mother around the house as she got ready for work. Mrs. Ogunleye sighed, looking at her daughter in expression. What is it, Kemi? I am already late for a meeting. Kemi bit her lip, hesitating. She didn't want to upset her mother, but she needed answers. Is it okay for siblings to be in love? Her mother paused, barely registering the question. Of course, Kemi. Why wouldn't it be? Siblings should love each other. Kemi tried again, her voice trembling. No, I mean, Kemi, I really don't have time for this right now. Her mother interrupted, grabbing her purse. You are overthinking things. Now go and finish your homework. With that, Mrs. Ogunleye left, leaving Kemi standing in the middle of the living room, feeling more lost than ever. That evening, Kemi and Tunde sat on the couch watching TV in silence. The tension between them was thick, neither of them knowing how to address what was happening. Kemi wanted to tell Tunde about her conversation with their mother, but she didn't know how to bring it up. Are you okay? Tunde asked, breaking the silence. Kemi nodded, but her mind was far from okay. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, but she didn't know how to fix it. And with their parents so distant, she and Tunde were left to figure things out on their own. As the weeks went by, Kemi's feeling for her brother only grew stronger, and she could tell Tunde felt the same. But they both kept quiet, afraid of what might happen if they acknowledged the truth. It started small, innocent touch that neither of them thought twice about. A hand brushing against a shoulder, a playful hug that lingered just a little too long. At first, Kemi told herself that it was normal. After all, they were siblings. But as time went on, those innocent moments began to feel different. Tunde too seemed to be struggling with the shift in their relationship. He would glance at Kemi out of the corner of his eyes, his expression unreadable. When they sat together on the couch, their legs would touch, and neither of them would move away. It was as if they were testing the boundaries of what was acceptable, but neither had the courage to stop. One evening, as they sat side by side watching a movie, Tunde reached for the remote, accidentally brushing Kemi's hand. She felt a jolt of electricity shot through her, and she knew, without a doubt, that things between them had changed. Tunde, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He turned to her, his eyes wide with uncertainty. What's wrong? I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what is happening. Tunde didn't respond, but the look in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. He felt it too. From that moment on, everything was different. Their once close friendship had shifted into something more, something dangerous. They both knew it, but neither wanted to face the truth. They continued spending time together, but the tension between them grew with each passing day. Kemi thought about telling her mother again, but after their last conversation, she knew it was pointless. Her mother wouldn't listen, and her father, though kinder and more understanding, was hardly ever home. She felt trapped in a world where no one understood her, except for Tunde. It wasn't long before their relationship crossed the line. One night, as they sat in Kemi's room talking, the air between them felt thick with unspoken words. Kemi could feel her heart raising as Tunde leaned in closer, his hand brushing against hers. Kemi, he whispered, his voice filled with uncertainty. Before she could respond, Tunde closed the distance between them, pressing his lips on hers. Kemi froze, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. This was wrong, she knew it. But in that moment, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like the only thing that made sense. When they finally pulled away, both of them sat in silence, unsure of what to say. Kemi's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the full weight of what had just happened. Tunde, she whispered, her voice trembling. We can't. I know, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper, but I don't know how to stop. As the days turned into weeks, Kemi and Tunde struggled with the consequences of their actions. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but neither of them could bring themselves to stop. Their feelings for each other had grown too strong, too complicated, and now they were caught in a web they couldn't escape. Kemi tried once again to talk to her mother. She wanted to tell her everything, to confess the truth and ask for help. But every time she tried, her mother would brush her off, too focused on her business to notice the turmoil brewing inside her daughter. One evening, Kemi gathered the courage to try again. Mom, I need to talk to you about something important, she said, standing in the doorway of her mother's office. Mrs. Ogunleye looked up from her computer. Her brow frowned in annoyance. Kemi, I am in the middle of something. Can't it wait? No, it can't, Kemi insisted, her voice shaking. Please, Mom, just listen. Her mother signed, pushing her chair back from the desk. Fine, what is it? Kemi swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. I have been feeling different lately about Tunde, and I don't know what to do. Mrs. Ogunleye raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. What do you mean? Different. You and Tunde have always been close. Kemi hesitated, her hands trembling. It is more than that. I think I'm in love with him. For a moment, her mother just stared at her, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then, with a dismissive wave, she turned back to her computer. Kemi, you are overthinking things again. It is perfectly normal for siblings to love each other. Now go and finish your homework. Kemi felt the knot in her chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to make her mother understand. But it was no use. Her mother wouldn't listen. That night, as Kemi lay in bed, she felt more alone than ever. She couldn't talk to her mother, and she couldn't stop the feelings she had for Tunde. She was trapped, and there was no one who could help her. As the weeks went on, Kemi's confusion turned to guilt. She knew what she and Tunde were doing was wrong, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. The more time they spent together, the deeper their feelings grew, and soon they were caught in a cycle they couldn't break. But everything changed one morning when Kemi woke up feeling sick. At first, she thought it was just a cold, but as the days passed, her illness didn't go away. She started feeling sick in the morning, and she couldn't keep food down. Her mother noticed her daughter's pale complexion and reluctantly decided to take her to the hospital. The day at the hospital was a blur for Kemi. Her mother, as always, was in a rush, constantly checking her watch and signing with impatience as they waited for the doctor to see them. Can we hurry this up, please? I have an important meeting, Mrs. Ogunleye snapped at the receptionist, who gave her a disapproving look. When they were finally called into the doctor's office, Kemi felt her stomach twist with nerves. She had no idea what was wrong with her, but a part of her feared the truth. The doctor, a kind-looking man in his early 40s, smiled gently at Kemi. We are going to run a few tests just to see what is going on, he said. Kemi nodded, her hands trembling in her lap as the doctor examined her. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor finally returned with the results. I am afraid there's been a delay, he said, glancing at Kemi and then her mother. We had to run the test again to make sure. Well, what is the problem? Mrs. Ogunleye asked impatiently, tapping her foot on the floor. The doctor took a deep breath before speaking. Kemi is 2 months pregnant. The room fell into a stunned silence. Kemi felt her heart drop into her stomach as the word sank in. Pregnant? She couldn't believe it. How could this be happening? Her mother, on the other hand, exploded with disbelief. What? That's impossible. There must be some kind of mistake. My daughter is only 15 years old and she's a virgin. Kemi wanted to disappear. She couldn't look at her mother, couldn't face the reality of what was happening. But the doctor's words echoed in her ears. I am sorry, Mrs. Ogunleye, but the tests are accurate. The doctor said gently, your daughter is pregnant. Mrs. Ogunleye turned to Kemi, her eyes wide with shock. Kemi, is this true? Are you really pregnant? Kemi felt tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't know how to answer. She didn't want to face the truth, but there was no escaping it now. Mom, she whispered, her voice breaking. I am sorry, I didn't know. Her mother's face turned pale. But how? You're too young for this. Who? Kemi hesitated for a long moment before finally whispering, is Tunde. Who is Tunde? Which Tunde? How? Where did you meet him? Mrs. Ogunleye asked. Tunde, my brother, Kemi replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed Kemi's confession was suffocating. Mrs. Ogunleye stood frozen, staring at her daughter as if she hadn't fully processed what she had just heard. Her face paled and her lip quivered as she tried to make sense of it all. Tunde, she stammered, barely able to speak. Your brother. Kemi could only nod, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to disappear, to wake up from this nightmare. Her mother's face twisted in disbelief, shock and anger all at once. How could this happen? How could you let this happen? Mrs. Ogunleye's voice rose to a shriek, her body trembling as she struggled to hold back the tears that were now filling her eyes. Kemi felt like she was drowning in guilt. I am sorry, Mom, she whispered, her voice barely audible. We didn't mean for this to happen. It just happened. The end of part 1. Please let me know what you think about this story in the comment section. Do you think they should keep the baby or they should abort the baby? And whose fault? Do you think it's the children's fault or the parents' negligence? Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.